Hello guys, today we are going to read My Father's Dragon 2.0. So we're going to read until chapter 3 to chapter 6. So let's begin. Chapter 3. My father finds the island. My father hid in the hold for 6 days and nights. Twice he was nearly caught when the ship stopped to take on more cargo, but at last he heard a sailor say that the next port would be Cranberry and that they'd be unloading the wheat there. My father knew that the sailors would send him home if they caught him. So he looked at his knapsack and took out a rubber band and an empty grain bag with the label saying Cranberry. At the last moment, my father got inside the bag, knapsack and all, floated the top of the bag inside, and put the rubber band around the top. He didn't look just exactly like the other bags, but it was the best he could do. Soon the sailors came to unload. They loaded a big net into the hold and began moving the bags of wheat. Suddenly one sailor yelled, "Great Scott! This is the queerest bag of wheat I've ever seen. It's all lumpy like, but the label says it's to go to Cranberry." The other sailors looked at the bag too. And my father, who was in the bag, of course, tried even harder to look like a bag of wheat. Then another sailor felt the bag, and he just happened to get hold of my father's elbow. "I know what this is," he said. "This is a bag of dried corn on the cob." And he dumped my father into the big net along with the bags of wheat. This all happened in the late afternoon, so late that the merchant in Cranberry who had ordered the wheat didn't count his bags until the next morning. He was a very particular man and never late for dinner. The sailors told the captain, and the captain wrote down on a piece of paper that they delivered 160 bags of wheat and 1 bag of dried corn on the cob. They left the piece of paper for the merchant and sailed away that evening. My father heard later that the merchant spent the whole next day counting and recounting the bags and filling each one, trying to find the bag of dried corn on the cob. He never found it because as soon as it was dark, my father climbed out of the bag, folded up, and put it back in his knapsack. He walked along the shore to a nice sandy place and lay down to sleep. My father was very hungry when he woke up the next morning. Just as he was looking to see if he had anything left to eat, something hit him on the head. It was a tangerine. He had been sleeping right under a tree full of big fat tangerines. And then he remembered that this was the island of Tangiera. Tangerine trees grow wild everywhere. My father picked as many as he had room for, which was 31, and started off to find Wild Island. He walked and walked and walked along the shore, looking for the rocks that joined the two islands. He walked all day, and once when he met a farm fisherman and asked him about the wild island, the fisherman began to shake and couldn't talk for a long while. It scared him that much, just thinking about it. Finally, he said, "Many people have tried to explore Wild Island, but not one has come back alive. We think they were eaten by the wild animals." This didn't bother my father. He kept walking and slept on the beach again that night. It was beautifully clear the next day, and way down the shore my father could see a long line of rocks leading out into the ocean. And way out, as the end, you could just see a tiny patch of green. He quickly ate 7 tangerines and started down the beach. It was almost dark when he came to the rocks, but there, way out in the ocean, was the patch of green. He sat down and rested a while, remembering the cat had said, "If you can, go out to the island at night, because then the wild animals won't see you coming along the rocks, and you can hide when you get there." So my father picked 7 more tangerines, put it on his black rubber boots, and waited for the dark. It was a very black night, and my father could hardly see the rocks ahead of him. Sometimes they were quite high, and sometimes the waves almost covered them, and they were slippery and hard to walk on. Sometimes the rocks were far apart, and my father had to get a running start and leap from one to the next. After a while, he began to hear a rumbling noise. It grew louder and louder as he got nearer to the island. At last, it seemed as if he was right on top of the noise, and he was. He had jumped from a rock onto the back of a small whale who was fast asleep and cuddled up between 2 rocks. The whale was snoring and making more noise than a steam shovel. So I never heard my father say, "Oh, I didn't know that was you." And I never knew my father had jumped on his back by mistake. For 7 hours, my father climbed and slipped and leaped from the rock to rock. But while it was still dark, he finally reached the very last rock and stepped off onto Wild Island. Chapter 4. My father finds the river. The jungle began just beyond a narrow strip of beach. Thick, dark, damp, scary jungle. My father hardly knew where to go, so he crawled under a waku bush to think, and ate 8 tangerines. Because the dragon was tied somewhere along its bank. Then he thought, if the river flows into the ocean, I ought to be able to find it quite easily if I just walk along the beach far enough. So my father walked until the sun rose, and he was quite far from the ocean rocks. It was dangerous to stay near them because they might be guarded in the day. time. He found a clump of tall grass and sat down. Then he took off his rubber boots and ate 3 more tangerines. He could have eaten 12, but he hadn't seen any tangerines on this island, and he could not risk running out of something to eat. My father slept all that day and only woke up late in the afternoon when he heard a funny little voice saying, "Queer, queer, what a little dear little duck. I mean, dear, dear, what a queer little rock." My father saw a tiny paw rubbing itself on his knapsack. He lay very still, and the mouse, for it was a mouse, hurried away, muttering to itself, "I must smell tangerine. I must tell somebody." My father waited a few minutes and then started down the beach because it was almost dark now. And he was afraid that the mouse really would tell somebody. He walked all night and 2 scary things happened. First, he just had to sneeze, so he did. And somebody close by said, "Is that you, Monkey?" My father said, "Yes." And the voice said, "You must have something on your back, Monkey." And my father said yes, because he did. He had his knapsack on his back. "What do you have on your back, Monkey?" asked the voice. My father didn't know what to say because what would a monkey have on its back? And how would it sound telling someone about it? And if it did have something? Just then another voice said, "I bet you're taking your sick grandmother to the doctor." My father said yes and hurried on. Quite by accident, he found out later that he had been talking to a pair of tortoises. The second thing that happened was that the nearly walked right between 2 wild boars who were talking in low, solemn whispers. When he first saw the dark shapes, he thought they were boulders. Just in time, he heard one of them say, "There are 3 signs of a ration invitation. First, fresh." Look at the picture. Is there something that interests you? Oh, look. There's the father hiding in the bushes. Tangerine peels were found under a wahoo bush near the ocean rocks. Second, a mouse reported an incendiary rock some distance from the ocean rocks, which upon further investigation simply wasn't there. However, more fresh tangerine peels were found at the same spot, which is the third sign invitation. Since tangerines do not grow on our island, somebody must have brought them across the ocean rocks from another island, which may or may not have something to do with the apparent and or disappearance of the extraordinary rock reported by the mouse. After a long silence, the other boar said, "You know, I think we're taking this too seriously. Those peels probably floated over here by them sleeves. And you know how unavailable mice are. Besides, if there had been an invitation, I would have seen it. Perhaps you're right, said the first boar. Shall we ride upon? They were trundled back into the jungle. Well, that taught my father a lesson, and after that he saved all his tangerine peels. He walked all night and toward morning came to the river. Then his trouble really began. Chapter 5. My father meets some tigers. The river was very wide and muddy, and the jungle was very gloomy and dense. The trees grew close to each other, and what room there was between them was taken up by great high ferns with sticky leaves. Sticky, sticky, sticky. My father hated to leave the beach, but he decided to start along the riverbank where at least the jungle was quite so thick. He ate 3 tangerines, making sure to keep all the peels this time, and put on his rubber boots. My father tried to follow the riverbank, but it was very swampy, and as he went farther, the swamp became deeper. When it was almost as deep as his bootstraps, he got stuck in the oozy, mucky mud, and my father tugged and nearly pulled his boots right off. But at last, he managed to wade to a drier place. Here the jungle was so thick that he could hardly see where the river was. He unpacked his compass and figured out the direction he should walk in order to stay near the river. But he didn't know that the river made a very sharp curve away from him just a little way beyond. And so as he walked straight ahead, he was getting farther and farther away from the river. It was very hard to walk in the jungle. The sticky leaves of the ferns caught on my father's hair, and he kept tripping over roots and rotten logs. Sometimes the trees were clumped so closely together that he couldn't squeeze between them and had to walk a long way around. He began to hear whispering noises, but he couldn't see any animals anywhere. The deeper into the jungle went, the surer he was that something was following him. And then he thought he heard whispering noises on both sides of him as well as behind. He tried to run, but he tripped over more roots. The noises only came nearer. Once or twice he thought he heard something laughing at him. At last, he came out into a clearing and ran right into the middle of it so that he could see anything that might try to attack him. Was he surprised when he looked and saw 14 green eyes coming out of the jungle and all around the clearing? And when the tigers' green eyes turned to 7 tigers, the tigers walked around him in a big circle, looking hungry all the time, and They sat down and began to talk. I suppose you thought we didn't know you were transparent in our jungle. Then the next tiger spoke. I suppose you're going to say you didn't know it was our jungle. Did you know that not one explorer has ever left this island alive, said the third tiger. My father thought of the cat and knew this wasn't true, but of course he had too much sense to say so. One doesn't contract a hungry tiger. The tigers went on talking in the turn. You're our first little boy, I'm so curious to know if you're especially tender. Maybe you think we have regular mean times. But we don't. We just eat whatever we're feeling hungry, said the fifth tiger. And we're very hungry now. In fact, I can hardly wait, said the sixth. I can't wait, said the seventh tiger. And then all tigers sat together in a loud roar. Let's begin right now. And they moved in closer. My father looked at those 7 hungry tigers, and he had an idea. Quickly, he opened his knapsack and took out the chewing gum. The cat had told him that tigers were especially fond of chewing gum, which is very scarce on this island. So he threw them each a piece, but they only growled. As fond as we are of chewing gum, we're sure we'd like you even better. And then they moved so close that he could feel them breathing on his face. But this is a very special chewing gum, said my father. If you keep on chewing it long enough, it will turn green. And then, if you plant it, it will grow more chewing gum. And sooner you start chewing, the sooner you'll have more, the tiger said. Why, you don't say. Isn't that fine? And each one wanted to be the first to plant the chewing gum. They all unwrapped their pieces and began chewing hard as they could. Every once in a while, one tiger would look into another's mouth and say, "No, it's not done yet." Until finally they were also busy looking into each other's mouth to make sure that no one was getting ahead, that they forgot all about my father, especially. Chapter 6. My father meets rhinoceros. My father soon found a trail leading away from the clearing. All sorts of animals might be using it too, but he decided to follow the trail no matter what he met because it might lead to the dragon. He kept a sharp lookout in front and behind and went on. Just as he was feeling quite safe, he came around a curve right behind the 2 wild boars. One of them was saying to the other, "Did you know that the tortoises thought they saw Monkey carrying his sick grandmother to the doctor's last night?" "But Monkey's grandmother died a week ago, so they must have seen something else. I wonder what it was. I told you that there was an invitation afoot, said the other boy. And I instead to find out what it is. I simply can't stand invasions. Me neither, said the tiny neither, said the tiny little voice. I mean, me neither. And my father knew that the mouse was there too. Well, said the first boy, you search down the trail up this way to the dragon, and I'll go back down the other way through the big clearing, and we'll stand mouse to watch the ocean rocks in case the inversion should decide to go away before we find it. My father hid behind a mangrove tree just in time, and the first boar walked right past him. My father waited for the other boar to get head start on him, but he didn't wait very long because he knew that when the first boar saw the tigers chewing gum in the clearing, he'd been even more suspicious. Soon the trail crossed a little brook, and my father, who by this time was very thirsty, stopped to get a drink of water. He still had on his rubber boots, so he wandered into a little pool of water and was stopping down when something quite sharp picked him up by the seat of the pants and shook him very hard. So you know that's my favorite weeping pool, said the deep, angry voice. My father couldn't see who was talking because he was hanging in the air right over the pool. But he said, "Oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't know that everybody has a private weeping pool." "Everybody doesn't," said the angry voice, "but I do because I have such big things to weep about. And I drown everybody I find using my weeping pool." The animal tossed my father up and down over the water. "Was it that you weep about so much?" asked my father, trying to get his breath, and he thought over all the things he had in his pack. "Oh, I have many things to weep about, but the biggest thing is the color of my tusk." My father screamed every which way trying to see the tusk, but it was through the seat of his pants where he couldn't possibly see it. "When I was a young rhinoceros, my tusk was purpley white, and the animal and my father knew that he was hanging by the seat of his pants from rhinoceros' tusk. But it has turned a nasty yellow grain in my old age, and I find it very ugly. You see, everything else about me is ugly, but when I had a beautiful tusk, I didn't worry so much about the rest. And now that my tusk is ugly too, I can't sleep nights just thinking about how completely ugly I am. And I weep all the time. But why should I be telling you these things. I caught you using my pool and now I'm going to drown you. Oh, wait a minute, Rhinoceros, said my father. I have some things that will make your tusk all white and beautiful again. Just let me down and I'll give them to you. The rhinoceros said, You do? I can hardly believe it. Why? I'm so excited. He put my father down and danced around in a little circle while my father got out the tube of toothpaste and the toothbrush. Now, said my father, just move to tusk a little nearer, please, and I'll show you how to begin. My father wet the brush in the pool, squeezed on a dab of toothpaste, and scrubbed very hard in one tiny spot. Then he told the rhinoceros to wash it off, and when the pool was calm again, he told the rhinoceros to look in the water and see how white the little spot was. It was hard to see in the dim light of the jungle, but sure enough, the spot shone properly white, just like new. The rhinoceros was so pleased that he grabbed the toothbrush and began scrubbing violently, forgetting all about my father. Just then my father heard footsteps and he jumped behind the rhinoceros. It was the boar coming back from the big clearing where the tigers were chewing gum. The boar looked at the rhinoceros and the toothbrush and the tube of toothpaste, and he scratched his ear on a tree. Tell me, rhinoceros, he said, where did you get that fine tube of toothpaste and that toothbrush? Too busy, said the rhinoceros, and he went on brushing as hard as he could. The boar, sufferingly angry, and trotted down the trail toward the dragon, muttering to himself, very suspicious. Tigers are too busy chewing gum. Rhinoceros too busy brushing his tusk. Must get hold of that invitation. Don't like it one bit. Not one bit, and observing everybody terribly wondered that it's doing here anyway. Chapter 7. We're going to read in the next episode. So, goodbye. See you next time.